Everyone in the town laughed at him when he said he wanted a wife. But what they didn't know was that one decision would start a war. The man everyone laughed at. Hook. Use at the very start of your video. Before the story begins, if you believe even the most broken souls deserve love, take a moment to subscribe, because this story might just change how you see people forever. The laughter started the moment he stepped through the door. It rolled across the saloon like thunder, loud, mocking, cruel. Boots scraped against wooden floors as men turned to look. Cards were lowered. Whiskey glasses paused midair. Even the piano player missed a note, because standing in the doorway was a man who didn't belong. He was tall, too tall. Broad, like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves. His coat was worn, dust clinging to every inch. His beard was uneven, and his nose, crooked like it had been broken more than once. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was his silence, his stillness, the way he looked at the room, not with fear, not with anger, but with something far heavier. Loneliness. Well, I'll be damned, one cowboy muttered, smirking. Looks like the mountains learned to walk. Laughter erupted again. The man didn't react. He stepped inside slowly, boots heavy against the wooden floor, each step echoing louder than the laughter itself. The bartender leaned forward, wiping a glass. You lost, friend. The stranger shook his head once. Then, in a voice deep and rough like gravel dragged across stone, he said, I'm looking for a wife. Silence. For a split second, the entire saloon froze. Then, the place exploded. Men slammed tables, howling with laughter. One nearly fell off his chair. Another choked on his drink. A wife, someone shouted. For you. You planning to scare her into saying yes. The stranger stood there, unmoving. Taking it, every laugh, every insult, like he was used to it. And maybe he was. He walked to the bar, ignoring the noise, and placed a small leather pouch on the counter. Coins clinked inside. I can provide, he said simply. The bartender raised an eyebrow. Money ain't the problem, mountain man. It's, well, he gestured vaguely at him. Everything else. More laughter. But then, a chair scraped loudly across the floor. Not mocking, not amused, different. Everyone turned. At a table near the window sat a woman. She hadn't laughed, not once. Her dress was simple but clean. Blue fabric, neatly pressed. Her hair tied back, her posture straight. But it wasn't her appearance that drew attention. It was her eyes, sharp, observing, unafraid. She stood slowly. The room quieted, not completely, but enough. She walked toward him, each step calm, measured. The stranger noticed her now. For the first time since entering, something shifted in his expression. Not hope, not yet, but something close to it. She stopped in front of him. Close enough that the laughter faded into the background. Close enough that she could see the scars on his face, and the exhaustion behind his eyes. What's your name? She asked. Her voice was steady, clear, the kind that didn't bend easily. The man hesitated, as if he hadn't been asked that in a long time. Elias, he said. She nodded once. I'm Clara. A cowboy scoffed loudly. You ain't serious, Clara. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze stayed locked on Elias. Why do you want a wife? She asked. Simple question, but the room leaned in. Because suddenly, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Elias swallowed. His hands, huge, rough, scarred, tightened slightly at his sides. I built a cabin, he said. In the mountains. Pause. It's empty. No one laughed this time. I have land, he continued. Water. Food. Another pause. But no one to share it with. The words were plain, unpolished, but they carried something real. Something heavier than all the laughter in the room. Clara studied him, not his face, not his clothes, him. You think a wife is something you can just ask for? She said. Elias shook his head slowly. No, he replied. I think it's something you hope for. That hit differently. Even the loudest men in the room went quiet. Clara turned slightly, glancing at the crowd. At the same men who had laughed moments ago. Then back at Elias. What if she says no? She asked. Elias didn't hesitate this time. Then I leave, he said. No anger. No argument. Just truth. Clara folded her arms, thinking, measuring him. The entire saloon waited, because somehow, this had become something more than entertainment. It had become a moment. And then, she asked the question that changed everything. If someone came with you, she said, would you treat her as a partner, or as something you bought with that pouch of coins? The air shifted, sharp, tense. Elias looked at the pouch, then back at her. His voice, when he spoke, was quieter now. I don't want to buy anyone, he said. I just don't know how else to ask. Silence. Real silence. Not mocking, not amused, heavy. Clara's expression softened, just slightly. Because for the first time, she saw it clearly. Not a brute, not a fool, just a man who had lived too long alone. She reached out, not to take the money, but to push the pouch back toward him. You're asking the wrong way, she said. Elias frowned slightly. Then what's the right way? Clara met his eyes, and for the first time, there was something almost like a challenge in hers. You start, she said, by asking someone to stay, not to belong to you. The words hung in the air, and something changed in Elias. Not all at once, but enough. Behind them, someone muttered, this is ridiculous. Another laughed nervously, but it didn't matter anymore. Because the moment had shifted. From mockery, to something no one expected. Elias took a breath, then looked at Clara again. Different now, more careful, more human. Would you? He started, then stopped. He wasn't used to this. To asking, to vulnerability. Clara waited, patient, unmoved. And finally, Elias said, would you consider coming with me, to see the life I built? The room held its breath. Clara didn't answer right away. She turned, looking around the saloon one last time. At the men, the laughter, the smallness of it all. Then back at Elias, a man who had been laughed at, but hadn't lashed out. A man who didn't know the right words, but meant every one he said. Maybe, she replied, and just like that, the laughter was gone. The journey into silence. The next morning, the town was quieter. Not because people had nothing to say, but because everyone was watching. Elias stood near the edge of town, beside his horse. A large, dark animal, strong, like him. Saddlebags packed, supplies tied down carefully, everything prepared with the precision of a man who lived far from help. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking back at the town. Waiting. You really think she'll come? The voice came from behind him. Elias didn't turn. I don't know, he said honestly. The man chuckled. Women like her don't go off into the mountains with men like you. Elias finally looked over his shoulder. Maybe, he said, but she said, maybe. And to a man like him, that meant everything. Footsteps approached, light, steady. Elias turned again, and there she was, Clara, dressed differently now, not like someone sitting in a saloon. She wore a traveling coat, boots dusted from the road, and carried a small bag over her shoulder. She had made a choice. And it showed. You're late, Elias said. Not accusing, just stating. Clara raised an eyebrow. I didn't say I was coming. Elias nodded once. You didn't say you weren't. A faint smile touched her lips. Fair enough. The same men from the saloon watched from a distance. No one laughed this time. Because now, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. Clara stopped a few feet from him. Close enough to leave, far enough to stay safe. This doesn't mean anything, she said. I'm just seeing. Elias nodded again. That's enough. He offered her his hand to help her onto the horse. She hesitated, not out of fear, but principle. I can get on myself, she said. And she did. Smooth, confident. Elias didn't argue, didn't insist. That mattered, more than either of them said out loud. And then, without another word, they left. The town faded behind them quickly. Dust rising under hooves, wooden buildings shrinking into the horizon. The noise, the judgment, the laughter, all swallowed by the open land. For a long time, they rode in silence. Clara watched the landscape change. Flat ground gave way to rolling hills, then to rougher terrain, rocks, narrow paths, pine trees appearing like silent watchers. "This is a long way from town," she said finally. Elias nodded. "That's the point." She glanced at him. "You don't like people." "I don't mind them," he replied. "They just don't like me." No bitterness, just truth. Clara studied him again. "You didn't seem angry yesterday," she said. "At the saloon." Elias shrugged slightly. "They don't know me, and that doesn't bother you." He thought for a moment, then said, "It used to." They kept riding. By midday, the sun burned high overhead. Elias slowed the horse near a stream. "We stop here," he said. Clara slid down from the horse, stretching slightly. Her eyes scanned the area, always observing. "You've done this before," she said. "Many times. Alone." Elias nodded. He began unloading a few supplies. Efficient. Quiet. Clara watched him for a moment, then moved closer. "You don't talk much," she said. Elias handed her a canteen. "Not much to say." She took it, but didn't drink yet. "That's not true," she replied. "Everyone has something to say." Elias looked at her. Then, unexpectedly, said, "Most people don't wait to hear it." That lingered between them. They sat by the stream. Water flowing gently, wind moving through the trees. No laughter here, no judgment, just quiet. Clara finally drank from the canteen. Then asked, "Why me?" Elias frowned slightly. "What do you mean? You could have asked anyone," she said. "Why did you listen to me?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He picked up a small stone, turned it in his fingers. "You didn't laugh," he said. Simple. But it hit. Clara looked away for a moment. Toward the water. Toward her own reflection. "You don't know anything about me," she said. Elias nodded. "That's why I asked you to come." She glanced back at him. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," he said quietly. "If I knew everything, I might have made up my mind already." Clara let out a small breath. Almost a laugh. Almost. But then, a sound. Hoofbeats. Distant, but coming closer. Elias stood instantly. All calm gone. Replaced with something sharp. Alert. "What is it?" Clara asked, rising quickly. Elias held up a hand. "Listening. Counting. 3, he said. "Maybe 4 riders." Clara's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. Elias noticed. "You know them." A pause. "Too long." "Maybe," she said. That was enough. Elias moved fast. "Get behind the rocks," he said. "Stay low. Don't speak." Clara didn't argue this time. She moved. Quick. Silent. The hoofbeats grew louder. Closer. Elias stepped forward, positioning himself in the open, between Clara and whoever was coming. A moment later, they appeared. 3 men on horseback. Rough-looking. Armed. The kind of men who didn't ride for pleasure. They slowed when they saw Elias. One of them smirked. "Well, look what we found," he said. Mountain Ghost finally came down. Elias didn't respond. Another rider leaned forward slightly, eyes scanning, not just Elias, the area, searching. Clara held her breath behind the rocks. "You seen a woman?" the first man asked. Elias' expression didn't change. "No." The man chuckled. "Pretty one. Blue dress. Sharp mouth." Clara's grip tightened on the ground. Elias shook his head once. "No." The riders exchanged glances. "Suspicious." "You sure about that?" one said. Elias stepped forward slightly. "Just enough." I said no. The tension snapped tight, like a rope about to break. Then, the lead rider smiled. "Slow. Dangerous. Careful," he said. "You're not in town anymore." Elias met his gaze, unflinching. "Neither are you." A long pause. Wind moving through the trees. Hooves shifting against dirt. And then, the rider laughed. But this time, it wasn't mocking. It was warning. "Let's go," he said to the others. And just like that, they turned and rode off. The sound of hooves faded slowly, until there was nothing again. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. Clara stepped out from behind the rocks. Her face, different now. More guarded, more real. Elias looked at her. You want to tell me who they were? Clara didn't answer right away. Then finally, she said, they're the reason I said, maybe. Elias didn't look surprised. Just, ready. Then I guess, he said quietly. You picked the right direction. Clara met his eyes, and for the first time, there was trust. Not complete, not yet, but growing, and far in the distance. Unseen by both of them, the riders had stopped, watching, the truth she was running from. The fire burned low that night. Small, careful, hidden between rocks so its light wouldn't travel too far. Elias sat across from it, sharpening his knife with slow, steady movements. Clara sat opposite him, quiet, too quiet. The events of the afternoon still lingered between them. Those riders, their questions, the way Clara had recognized them, before she admitted it. Elias finally broke the silence. They weren't just looking, he said. They were hunting. Clara didn't deny it. She stared into the fire, flames flickering in her eyes. They won't stop, she said quietly. Elias nodded. I figured. Another silence, but this one felt heavier. Because now, there were questions that needed answers. Elias set the knife down. Who are they? He asked. No pressure in his voice, but no room to avoid it either. Clara took a slow breath, as if deciding something. Then, they work for my husband. The words landed hard, even in the quiet of the mountains. Elias didn't react immediately, but something in his posture shifted. Not anger, not judgment, just attention. I thought you said, he started. I didn't say anything, Clara interrupted softly. And she was right, she hadn't. The fire cracked, a log shifted, time stretched. Elias leaned back slightly. Is he the kind of man people run from? He asked. Clara let out a bitter breath. No, she said, he's the kind of man people don't escape from. That said everything. Elias studied her now, not as a stranger. Not even as a woman he'd invited along, but as someone carrying something dangerous. Why are they looking for you? He asked. Clara's hands tightened around her coat, then slowly loosened. I wasn't supposed to leave, she said. Elias almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Most people who run weren't supposed to, he said. Clara looked at him, and for a moment, there was something raw in her expression. You don't understand, she said. Elias met her gaze. Then help me. That did it. Clara looked away, back into the fire. And finally, she began. I was married at 18. She said, to a man twice my age. Elias didn't interrupt. He wasn't poor, she continued. He owned land. Men worked for him. People respected him. A pause. Feared him. The fire flickered higher for a moment. Then settled. At first, it wasn't bad, Clara said. Or maybe I just didn't know what bad was yet. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes, they told more. He decided everything, she went on. What I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. She swallowed. And eventually, whether I spoke at all. Elias, hands tightened slightly on his knees. But he stayed quiet. Clara let out a slow breath. I became something in his house, she said. Not a person, not a partner. Her voice dropped. Something owned. The word echoed. Elias looked at the ground for a moment. Then back at her. You left, he said. Clara nodded. Yes. A small pause. I wasn't supposed to survive it. That explained the riders. They'll keep coming, Elias said. It wasn't a question. Clara met his eyes again. And this time, there was no hesitation. No, she said. They won't stop until they find me. The fire cracked again. Louder this time. Elias stood up slowly, walked a few steps away. Thinking. Clara watched him, unsure now. Because this was the moment. The moment where he could decide. This is too much. This isn't worth it. Turn back. Leave her. She'd seen it before. People always chose safety. Elias, she said quietly. You can still go back. He didn't turn around. You didn't ask for this, she continued. You don't owe me anything. Silence. Then, Elias spoke, still facing away. I know. Clara's chest tightened slightly, because she knew what usually came next. And that's why I'm leaving. But that's not what he said. After a long moment, Elias turned back toward her. His expression was calm, but there was something new in his eyes. Something steady. I didn't ask for you to come either, he said. But you did. Clara blinked slightly. Elias stepped closer, stopping just within the firelight. You said you were just seeing, he went on. So am I. Clara stared at him, trying to understand. Elias continued, I don't know your past. I don't know what's chasing you. Pause. But I know this. His voice lowered slightly, firm. You're not going back. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said. Clara felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not doubt, something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. But she pushed it down quickly. You can't promise that, she said. Elias shook his head once. You're right, he said. Another step closer. But I can stand in the way of anyone who tries. No bravado, no pride, just truth. Clara looked at him, really looked this time, at the scars, the roughness, the quiet strength, and suddenly, the man everyone had laughed at in that saloon didn't seem small at all. Far from it. You don't even know me, she whispered. Elias. Answer came without hesitation. I know enough. A long silence followed, but this one was different, not heavy, not tense, quiet, but warm. Clara pulled her coat tighter around herself. Not from the cold, but from everything she was feeling. You should get some rest, Elias said after a while. We move early. Clara nodded, laying down near the fire. Elias stayed awake, sitting, watching, listening, because out here, trust didn't come from words. It came from staying, from protecting, from not leaving, and somewhere in the darkness, far beyond the firelight, 3 riders moved again, tracking, waiting, and this time, they weren't alone. The night of blood and fire. The attack came before dawn. The world was still dark. That quiet, fragile moment just before sunrise, when the air is cold, the sky is pale, and everything feels suspended. Clara was asleep, curled near the fading fire. For the first time in days, she had rested. Elias hadn't. He sat a few feet away, back against a tree, eyes open. Watching, listening, waiting, and then, a sound, not loud, not obvious, but wrong. A branch, snapping, far off. Elias, head lifted slightly. Still, focused. Another sound, closer this time. He stood instantly, silent, controlled. Then, a whisper of movement behind the trees. Elias moved fast. He crossed the small clearing in 2 steps and dropped beside Clara, placing a firm hand over her mouth before she could react. Her eyes flew open, panic, then recognition. Don't move, he whispered. Clara froze, listening now, and then she heard it too. Hoofsteps, slow, careful, surrounding. Her heart began to pound. They found us, she breathed. Elias nodded once. Stay behind me, he said. He helped her up, guiding her toward a cluster of rocks. Same as before, but this time, it wouldn't be enough. The first rider appeared between the trees. Then another. Then more. Not 3, not 4, 6. And at their center, a different man. He didn't look like the others. His clothes were cleaner, his posture straighter, his gaze, colder, controlled, calculating. Clara's breath caught. No, she whispered. Elias glanced back at her. You know him. Clara's voice barely came out. That's him, her husband. The man rode forward slowly. Not rushing, not angry, certain. Well, he said calmly, this is disappointing. His voice was smooth, refined, completely at odds with the men around him. Clara stepped out from behind the rocks. Elias immediately moved in front of her, blocking the view. Move, her husband said simply. Elias didn't. The man tilted his head slightly, studying him. So, he said, this is what you chose. Clara's voice came from behind Elias. I didn't choose him, she said. I chose to leave you. A flicker of something crossed the man's face. Gone just as quickly. You don't leave me, he replied. Elias stepped forward, just enough to draw attention. She does now, he said. The riders shifted, hands near weapons, tension rising like a storm about to break. Clara's husband looked at Elias. Really looked this time. Then, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You don't understand what you're standing in, he said. Elias' voice stayed steady. Seems simple enough. The man let out a quiet breath. As much as I admire that courage, he said, this doesn't end well for you. Elias didn't respond, because words were over. The first shot rang out. Chaos. Elias moved instantly, grabbing Clara and pulling her down behind the rocks as bullets tore through the space where they had stood. Stay down, he shouted. He drew his weapon, fired back. One rider dropped from his horse. Another shot, closer. Wood splintered, dirt kicked up, horses panicked. Clara covered her head, heart racing, breath shaking. But her eyes stayed open, watching. Elias didn't hesitate, didn't falter. He moved like a man who had done this before. Not wild, not reckless, precise. He fired again. Another rider fell, spread out. Someone shouted. The attackers moved, circling, trying to flank. Elias saw it, adjusted. He grabbed Clara's arm. We move, he said. What? She gasped. Now. He pulled her up and ran. Bullets followed. They moved through trees, over rocks, down a narrow slope. Branches snapping, breath burning, danger right behind them. Elias. Clara stumbled. He caught her before she fell. Didn't slow. Behind them, hoofbeats thundered. They're gaining, she cried. Elias scanned ahead, then saw it, a narrow ridge, steep drop on one side, dense trees on the other. This way, he shouted. They climbed fast, slipping, struggling. At the top, Elias turned, fired again, buying seconds, just enough. He grabbed Clara's hand, not pulling, not forcing, holding. Trust me, he said. She did. They moved along the ridge, dangerously close to the edge, rocks breaking loose beneath their feet. A shot rang out. Elias staggered. Clara's heart stopped. Elias. But he didn't fall. The bullet had grazed his arm. Blood, but not enough to stop him. Keep moving, he said through clenched teeth. Behind them, the riders reached the ridge. Closing in, Clara looked back, then forward, then made a choice. This way, she said suddenly. Elias followed without question. She led him off the ridge, through a hidden path, barely visible, narrow, steep. How do you know this? He asked. I don't, she said. But I know men like him. They moved faster. The path twisted downward, through rocks, through trees, until finally, silence. No hoofbeats, no voices, nothing. They stopped, both breathing hard. Elias leaned against a tree, blood running down his arm. Clara rushed to him. You're hurt. It's nothing, he said. It's not nothing, she snapped. She tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapped his arm tightly, hands steady despite everything. Elias watched her, not the wound, her. You didn't run, he said. Clara glanced up. What? You could've, he said. When it started, she held his gaze, and this time, there was no hesitation. I already did that once, she said. I'm not running alone again. Something shifted between them, deeper than before, stronger. Elias nodded once. Above them, far in the distance, a single gunshot echoed, not random, a signal. Clara's face went pale. What is it? Elias asked. She swallowed. That means, she said slowly. He's not done. Elias straightened, ignoring the pain. Good, he said. Clara looked at him, confused. Elias met her eyes, steady, unshaken. Neither am I, and somewhere in the mountains. The hunt had only just begun. The life they chose. The mountains were quiet again. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes before something ends, or begins. Elias and Clara didn't stop moving until the sun dipped low behind the peaks. By the time they reached it, the cabin stood in front of them. It was simple, rough wood, Strong beams, built by hands that didn't waste time on beauty, only survival. But there was something about it. Something steady. Something safe. Clara looked at it for a long moment. "This is it?" she asked softly. Elias nodded. "This is it." She stepped closer, running her fingers along the wood, taking it in. "You built this alone?" she asked. "Yes." Clara let out a quiet breath. Not impressed, not surprised, understanding, because now she knew what alone really meant. Inside, the cabin was just as simple. A table, 2 chairs, a bed, a fireplace. No decorations, no softness, no life. Clara stepped inside slowly, turning once, looking at Elias. "It's not empty anymore," she said. Elias didn't respond, but something in his eyes shifted. For a brief moment, everything felt still, like maybe, just maybe, they had made it. But then, a sound, distant, familiar, hoofbeats. Clara's body went rigid. "No." Elias moved immediately, to the door, looking out. Figures in the distance, coming fast. "They found us," Clara whispered. Elias didn't turn back this time. Instead, he stepped outside. "What are you doing?" Clara called. Elias' voice came calm, certain. Ending it. Clara rushed after him, grabbing his arm. "You can't fight them all." "I don't have to," he said. She stared at him, fear rising again. "They'll kill you," she said. Elias looked at her, and for the first time, there was something close to a smile. "Not before I stop him." The riders closed in, dust rising behind them. 6 again, and at the center, him, Clara's husband. They slowed as they approached the cabin, confident, certain. "You've made this far more difficult than it needed to be," he called out. Elias stepped forward, putting himself between them and Clara. "It's over," the man continued. "Come back, and I'll forget all of this." Clara stepped beside Elias now. Not behind him. "No," she said. The man's eyes darkened. "You don't get to say no." Elias did. She already did. The tension snapped again. But this time, there was no waiting. The first shot came from the riders. Elias moved, fired back. Chaos exploded across the clearing. But this time, Clara didn't hide. She grabbed the rifle Elias had left near the door. Hands shaking, but steady enough. A rider charged. She fired. He dropped. Elias saw it, just for a second, and something like pride crossed his face. The fight was shorter this time. Harder. Closer. One by one, the riders fell, until only one remained. Him, Clara's husband. He dismounted slowly, calm, even now. "You've changed," he said, looking at Clara. She didn't respond. "You were never like this," he continued. Clara stepped forward, weapon still in her hands. "I was never free," she said. The man's gaze shifted to Elias. "And you think he gives you that?" he asked. Clara didn't hesitate. "No," she said. "I chose it." That hit harder than any bullet. The man's expression cracked, just slightly. Then, he reached for his gun. But Elias was faster. One shot. Silence. The man fell. And just like that, it was over. The wind moved through the trees again. Soft. Calm. Clara stood there, still. Elias approached slowly. "Careful. It's done," he said. Clara looked at the ground. At the man who had controlled her life for so long. Then she took a breath. Deep. Shaking. And let it go. Years of fear. Of silence. Of being owned. Gone. She looked up at Elias. Eyes clearer now. Lighter. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Elias shook his head. "I know," he replied. A pause. Then, Clara stepped closer. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Not because she needed saving. But because she chose to. "You asked me to stay," she said softly. Elias held her gaze. "Yeah." Clara nodded. "I will." No hesitation. No fear. Just choice. Days passed. The cabin changed. A second chair moved closer to the fire. A blanket added to the bed. Laughter. Quiet at first, then real. Life. Not perfect. Not easy. But shared. And one evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Clara stood at the doorway, looking out. Elias walked up beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Clara smiled slightly. "That a man walked into a saloon and asked for a wife." She glanced at him, and didn't realize he'd have to fight the whole world to earn one. Elias almost smiled. "Worth it," he said. Clara leaned gently against him. "Yeah," she whispered. "Worth it. Please friends spot my channel, subscribe for more stories."